The State of California versus Marabella Weston. A short story by L.D. Roberts. If Vincent Bugliosi was alive, he would explain to you why he was the greatest prosecutor who ever lived. He would be genuinely surprised by your ignorance of all his achievements. Charles Manson was not present during the Tate LaBianca murders, and yet Bugliosi persuaded 12 jurors to convict him of murder. His meticulous trial preparation was legendary. Between 1964 and 1973, he tried 106 felony murder cases as a Los Angeles County District Attorney. He won 105 convictions. 50 years later, his name is still whispered with reverence in the halls of the LA County Courthouse. Young prosecutors sit in cramped offices reviewing witness statements and asking, what would Vince do? He wrote 11 books. Helter Skelter, the story of the Manson prosecution, has sold 7 million copies and is the best-selling true crime book in history. He won the Edgar Award for true crime writing 3 times. He never said one single word about my case. I am Marabella Weston. In 1972, I worked at Tom O'Brien's, the best Irish pub in LA. It has a long mirrored bar, red leather high-backed chairs, and wooden tables. It has the ambience of a gentleman's club, but it is far enough from downtown to avoid colleagues, and close enough to knock back a few and make an afternoon appearance at the office. The Irish stew could make your mother cry. On slow days, Ned would polish the bar till your face would smile back at you. My dad always told me, all money's good if you make enough of it. And I make more than enough of it at Tom O'Brien's. The bar patrons consist of accountants, businessmen, and so-called movie producers. On Wednesday, Max Raymond shuffled in. He had been in the movie business, had great stories of working with Laurel and Hardy. He had fringes of white hair on both sides of his head and faded eyes. He was a bit stooped, but tried to hide it. He sat down and laid his battered woolen cap on the table. Still have friends in the business. I can make some calls for you, he said. We have this discussion every week when he comes in for a scotch from company while his wife plays canasta. He cannot comprehend that I am the only woman in Los Angeles who doesn't want to work in the business. I patted his hand. No, thank you. You have something very special, he said. Scotch, I ask. A double, he says. His arthritis must be bothering him if he wants a double. I got his double Scots and placed it in front of him. He twirled the ice, took a sip, looked over the rim at me, like Rembrandt studying the light to translate my essence to canvas. You have a look about you. You could go to an orgy with the USC marching band on Saturday night and wake up a virgin on Sunday morning. He's right. I'm a looker. My long, slender legs go on forever. A bosom big enough to invite admiring looks and sideways glances. Flowing red hair the color of a blood orange. Blue eyes with tiny flecks of gray. Skin as delicate as china. Max jerked a thumb at Ned tending bar. Still wasting time with that one? Ned and I have been a couple for almost a year. He makes me laugh. Great sex. The problem? How long will I have to wait for an engagement ring? Tricia Emery wandered in through the back door, looking around for any able-bodied male to bring in the beer kegs for her. She's petite, with stocky legs, a thick waist, and thin lips. Stringy dishwater brown hair hangs in a limp ponytail. Everything about her is beige. No one would have brought the beer kegs in for her, except her father owned the brewery. She walked to the bar, leaned over, planted a loud sloppy kiss on Neg's cheek. He recoiled, as if he had been slapped. In that moment, I knew he was screwing her. If I thought he was cheating, I would have bet it was with Tawny Hansen, the LA Lakers cheerleader who came in every Wednesday after practice. I had no warning of this. He didn't cancel dates, wasn't too tired for sex. I loved him. He was the one. I had no choice but to wait until he grew tired of her. For months, I played dumb. For Christmas, he got me an expensive gold bracelet. I wore it every day and waited. Then 2 weeks before Valentine's Day, Tricia strolled in, pretending to make one of her so-called deliveries. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" I asked, putting on a fake smile. "Oh, I think you know." I was not going to make it easy for her. "No, I have no idea." Joe at the bar stopped wiping a glass. Sherry stared at us from across the room, and they waited, hoping I would slap her. A girl fight would brighten up a boring Wednesday. I relented and said, "Meet me at my apartment, 222 Holt, number 3. I'll be there around 6:30. She grinned, then walked out, abandoning the delivery. Must be nice to be the boss's daughter, I thought, balancing a huge tray of dirty glasses. Talk? About what? What were we going to do? Have a duel? At 6:22, I saw her out my front window. She had walked around the block twice. Her limp hair lay flat against her head. Her squinty eyes were half closed. I opened my front door before she had a chance to knock. As she stepped into my living room, I recognized what the dim light in the bar had hidden. The slight fullness in her face, the swell of her breasts. It hit me like a freight train. My mind couldn't grasp it. I hesitated, and when I found my voice, I asked, "How far along?" 4 months. Her father was very rich. In my mind's eye, I saw the country club wedding with 250 guests drinking champagne on a huge manicured lawn. Tricia wearing a long, white, puffy dress that would accentuate her short legs and make her skin look sallow. Ned, tall, handsome, standing at the altar, totally bewildered. I imagined an infant screaming in the background when Ned called me months later, whispering, "I miss you. Can I come over tonight? Please?" I blinked the dream out of my eyes. "Does Ned know?" I asked. "Not yet. I thought I should tell you first." "Sit down," I said, pointing to the couch. She sat and leaned back into the couch cushions. I walked around the corner and headed for the kitchen in the other room. "Want something to drink?" I asked. "Just water. Anything else might hurt my baby." I steadied myself and took a deep breath. Ned was lost to me. I tried to grasp the edges of my pain, but it was too deep. I turned on the faucet. As I reached for a glass, I noticed my grandmother's hefty wooden rolling pin in the dish drainer. It was the only thing she kept from her childhood, back in Warsaw. I grabbed it by the handle, hid it behind my back, and walked into the living room. Tricia's eyes were glancing at my new color television and the plush velvet armchairs. Was she wondering what else she could steal that was mine? I handed her the water. As she tipped the glass to her lips, I brought the rolling pin from behind my back, smashing it down on her head. The glass flew from her hand, her eyes bulged out like a cheap cartoon character. Blood flowed from her scalp and down the side of her face. I pulled my arm across my chest and backhanded her in the jaw. The force of the handle made her head spin. Her body fell to the carpet. Water trickled out of the side of her mouth. Her breath made a hissing sound as it leaked out of her body, and she died. I put the bloody rolling pin on the table and went to take a shower to wash the blood spatter out of my hair. I wondered how long it would be before I would be allowed to have another shower alone. I dried myself, put on a pair of jeans and a pink V-neck sweater. Then I dialed the police. I was sitting in an armchair, drinking a Heineken and smoking a Pall Mall, when I heard the knock. "Police!" "Come on in, it's open," I said loud enough to be heard through the door. The officer was lean and seasoned, with a flat face and dull eyes. He glanced from Tricia Emery's corpse to the bloody rolling pin, then back to me. He shrugged. Just another day on patrol. I put down my Heineken, shoved the butt into the top of the bottle, held my wrists out for him to cuff me. I learned the LA County Jail is crowded, dingy, and oppressive. I have no family and no way to make bail. So I sat in jail, kept my mouth shut, and waited. 16 days after my arraignment, my cell door opened and in walked a man about 26. He had a Marine buzz cut, white dress shirt gaping at the neck. He walked toward me, stuck out his hand. "I'm Jason Markson, your lawyer. The DA has made an offer." He looked so pleased with himself. "You can plead guilty to second-degree manslaughter and do 7 years. Most likely, you'd be out in 3. You're young. You could do your time and start over." He sounds like a used car salesman, acting like I should be grateful for his offering me a low-mileage 1970 Pontiac at an incredible discount. I was half listening as I watched a tiny brown wren fly past the bars of the window. "No deal," I said. "You do know California has the death penalty." I sighed. Who gave this idiot a law degree? "Death penalty is for first-degree murder. I am charged with manslaughter," I said patiently, as if teaching a 3-year-old to tie a shoe. He opened my file, flipped some pages, then pursed his lips. "I don't think you understand the seriousness of your situation. If you refuse to plead, your trial will begin next month. Vincent Bugliosi, the Manson prosecutor, will be trying your case." He said Vincent Bugliosi, like one would say Einstein, Picasso, or God. My trial began as scheduled 13 days later. The windowless courtroom was empty. Tricia's parents chose not to attend. I wore my navy blue suit with a skirt just above my knees, short enough to attract the admiration of male jurors, long enough to be respectable. My hair was curled into smooth ringlets to sit softly on each shoulder. Vincent Bugliosi wore a charcoal black suit with a white dress shirt. His only concession to color was a dull green necktie. He was tall, with the grace of an athlete. He had a long, thin face and wide brown eyes. The jury was made up of 9 men and 3 women. Vincent Bugliosi began his opening statement. "The evidence will show Marabella Weston," he said, pointing a long, thin finger at me, "took this rolling pin," he held it up, showcasing the long smear of dried blood, "and used it to beat Tricia Emery to death. Tricia was her rival for the affections of Ned Henderson. He was the man the defendant was determined to marry." Then he lowered his voice, paused, waited until the only sound in the courtroom was the tick of the clock. "Tricia Emery was 4 months pregnant." His eyes flickered with contempt. Then he called Sherry, the waitress from O'Brien. She testified hearing me give Tricia the address of my apartment. After she finished, Ned was called to the stand. He never even looked at me. He testified he had been having sex with Tricia for at least 8 months before she died. Then, the medical examiner testified that the deceased died of blunt force trauma to the head. My lawyer acted like a deaf mute. He just sat and watched Vincent Bugliosi in awe. When the medical examiner finished, the prosecution rested. I told Jason, "Put me on the stand." He shook his head. "Bugliosi will destroy you." "Do it," I hissed. I patted my cheek, felt smooth grains of face powder. Thank God for Max Factor face powder. Superfine grains of flesh-colored powder filled with tiny sparkles. On Monday, I wore tawny beige, enough color to banish the prison pallor. On Tuesday, I wore honey mist, the same shade as my skin. Today, I was wearing champagne blonde. I applied it carefully, looking into the cracked mirror in my cell. I brushed it over my temples, under my hairline, across the bottom of my jaw. The iridescence makes me look ethereal. The defense calls Marabella Weston to the stand. I walked slowly to the witness stand, was sworn in by the clerk. Jason began. "Did you know Miss Emery?" "Yes." "How did you know her?" "She delivered beer to O'Brien's, the bar where I work." "Did you know she was having sex with your boyfriend, Ned?" I opened my eyes wide, nodded my head slowly, as though I were in pain. "Please answer audibly," he stated. "Yes," I whispered. "Why was she in your apartment on the afternoon of Wednesday, January 12th, 1972? She stopped by the bar that afternoon, said we needed to talk." "Couldn't you have talked in the bar? Why did you invite her to your apartment?" "All the employees were watching. I wanted to talk in private. I had a split shift. I needed to go home and grab something to eat before my second shift. When you invited her to your apartment, did you plan to kill her? Oh, no, I said, looking down ashamed. No further questions. Jason mimicked Bugliosi as he buttoned his suit coat and nodded at the jurors as he took his seat. Vincent Bugliosi stood and took his time walking to the podium. Now, Miss Weston, it is Miss, correct? You have never been married? I have never been married. But you want to be. Doesn't every girl want to be married? You were in love with Ned Henderson. Still am. Don't think I will ever stop loving him. He's the only man for me. Your fellow waitress, Sherry, testified that before the murder of Trish Emery, you were waiting for Ned to propose. Is that true? I looked over at juror number 9, a matronly woman in her mid-30s with steel gray hair. She wore an ugly, pink, long-sleeved polyester dress. It bunched around her shoulders and was tied across the bust. It must have been on sale. I'm still waiting, I answered. Juror number 9 nodded. She, too, was still waiting. Did you kill Miss Emery? The clock stopped ticking. The jurors leaned forward, wide-eyed and anxious. I took a small breath, crossed my legs at the ankles, looked right at the jurors. In a small voice, I said, I killed her. She took my man. Ned is the only man I will ever love. A tear rolled silently down my face. Ned was my only chance for happiness. Well, that doesn't give you the right to commit murder, he thundered. Is that a question? I asked. Let me try again. Do you believe because you loved Ned, you had the right to murder Miss Emery and her unborn child? I looked over at juror number 4, a balding postal carrier with a hook nose. I think, I began when Jason shouted, Objection! What Miss Weston thinks has no bearing on this case. Objection sustained. Mr. Bugliosi, do you have any relevant questions? The judge asked. He shook his head slightly. The prosecution rests, Your Honor. The attorney's closing arguments passed by in a muddled rush of words. I stared out the dirty courtroom window at the smoggy LA morning. At 11:30 a.m., my case went to the jury. The jurors deliberated for 3 hours and 10 minutes. Juror number 7, a retired kindergarten teacher, handed the envelope to the clerk. He took it and walked to his desk, then opened it. We, the jury, in the above entitled manner, find defendant Marabella Weston not guilty of the murder of Tricia Emery. My lawyer turned to hug me. I laid a delicate hand on his chest, stepped back, and shook his hand. Bugliosi's face turned red, then a mottled purple. His jaw fell open. He shuffled papers on the table, fumbled with the change in his pants pocket. I, Marabella Weston, barmaid, had slipped through the master's fingers, demolishing 9 years of uninterrupted murder convictions. The clerk grabbed the phone on his desk, his bony fingers dialing frantically. In 5 minutes, every bailiff, court clerk, and defense lawyer in Los Angeles would learn about the verdict. They would sit in bars like O'Brien's, slap each other on the back, and order another round. Did you hear? The defendant confessed on the stand and was acquitted. No one would attempt to conceal their glee. I looked over at Mr. Bugliosi, tall, arrogant, and sure, so quick to judge. When he first read my file, he decided I was just another jealous broad with no brains and a bad temper. He had never seen me before trial. His skill, experience, and painstaking preparation could not help him. I knew something Mr. Bugliosi did not. When you are born with a perfect body and a face like a Botticelli angel, you can get away with murder. I was acquitted by a jury of my peers in the murder of Tricia Emery on July 16, 1973. On that date, every year, till he died, I sent Mr. Bugliosi a dozen long-stemmed red roses. I couldn't help myself. I hope you enjoyed listening. Please hit like and subscribe for more stories.